Hi, everyone. Welcome to Earthbound Health, where we care about your health and ours. Don't forget to subscribe and come back often to get more no-frills information that will help you create and maintain your health. Today, I want to ask you to imagine this. You're walking down the grocery store aisle, grabbing your favorite snacks. What if the masterminds behind the flavors and ingredients weren't food scientists but executives from tobacco companies? This is not just a conspiracy theory. It's a reality revealed by a study from the University of Kansas, published in the journal Addiction. Tobacco giants Philip Morris and R.J. Reynolds, notorious for selling addictive cigarettes, quietly shaped the American processed food industry from the 1980s through the early 2000s, bringing the same addictive strategies from cigarettes into everyday foods. The result has been a significant decline in public health. This shocking connection between big tobacco and big food raises important questions about the forces behind our daily food choices and how these corporate tactics continue to shape our health today. Two companies must bear most of the blame for the epidemic of food addiction and poor health faced by millions of Americans today. In the mid-1980s, facing declining cigarette sales and increasing public scrutiny over the health risks of smoking, tobacco companies began diversifying their holdings. Two companies must bear most of the blame for the epidemic of food addiction and poor health faced by millions of Americans today. In the mid-1980s, facing declining cigarette sales and increasing public scrutiny over the health risks of smoking, tobacco companies began diversifying their holdings. Their strategy was clear. To offset the losses in the tobacco market, they ventured into the food sector, which promised stable revenue and less regulatory oversight. Two key players in this move were Philip Morris and R.J. Reynolds. Philip Morris's major acquisitions. In 1985, Philip Morris acquired General Foods for $5.6 billion, followed by Kraft in 1988 for $12.9 billion. These acquisitions gave Philip Morris control over iconic American food brands like Kraft Cheese, Jell-O, Oscar Mayer, and Maxwell House. By the late 1980s, Kraft General Foods became the largest food company in the world. R.J. Reynolds' food empire. R.J. Reynolds followed a similar path, acquiring Nabisco in 1985 for $4.9 billion. Nabisco owned well-known brands like Oreo, Ritz Crackers, and Chips Ahoy, which would soon be shaped by the same corporate strategies R.J. Reynolds had used to market cigarettes. These acquisitions weren't just financial investments. They were part of a calculated strategy to bring big tobacco's expertise in marketing addictive products to the food industry. In short, the same companies responsible for pushing tobacco onto millions of Americans and destroying their health were now at the forefront of shaping what people ate. Hyper-palatable foods, a formula for addiction. The term hyper-palatable refers to foods that are engineered to be exceptionally tasty and satisfying, often by using combinations of fats, sugars, salt, and artificial additives that stimulate the brain's reward system. Big Tobacco applied the same principles that made cigarettes addictive to the development of processed foods. Deliberate formulation. A key finding of the addiction study was that food products owned by tobacco companies were 29% more likely to be classified as fat and sodium hyperpalatable, and 80% more likely to be carbohydrate and sodium hyperpalatable, compared to foods not owned by tobacco companies. These hyperpalatable combinations create a craving response in the brain, making it difficult to stop eating even after feeling full. Wrong fats and additives. Tobacco companies favored polyunsaturated fats, PUFAs, particularly omega-6 fats, which have been linked to inflammation and other negative health outcomes. These fats, combined with artificial ingredients, were used to craft foods that could trigger excessive eating. Unlike natural foods, these products contained ingredients designed specifically to make you crave more, much like how nicotine triggers cravings in cigarette smokers. Here is a real-life example. Consider popular snack foods like chips, cookies, and crackers. Many of these products were developed during the time when tobacco companies controlled major food brands. Their addictive qualities, such as the can't eat just one nature of potato chips, stem from the careful engineering of flavors and textures designed to keep consumers coming back for more. The negative impact on American public health is great. From the late 1980s to the early 2000s, Big Tobacco's influence on processed foods contributed significantly to the rise of diet-related health issues in the U.S. This era saw an explosion of ultra-processed foods dominating grocery store shelves, leading to widespread changes in American eating habits and, subsequently, public health. Obesity and overeating. As hyper-palatable foods became a staple in the American diet, rates of obesity skyrocketed. The carefully crafted flavor profiles, along with portion sizes that encourage overconsumption, played a major role in this trend. By the early 2000s, the U.S. was experiencing a public health crisis, with obesity rates doubling among adults and tripling among children since the 1980s. Diabetes and heart disease. The overconsumption of processed foods high in unhealthy fats, sugars, and sodium has been linked to increased rates of type 2 diabetes and heart disease. For example, foods loaded with omega-6 fats and carbohydrates stimulate insulin spikes, which over time can lead to insulin resistance and type 2 diabetes. Here is a real-life example. Foods like sugary breakfast cereals, frozen dinners, and snack cakes became the norm for many American families during this time. These foods, heavily marketed and engineered by companies previously owned by Big Tobacco, often replaced healthier whole food options in everyday diets, contributing to the rapid rise of chronic health conditions. Targeting children. The sweet drink strategy. One of the most troubling aspects of Big Tobacco's influence on the food industry is its focus on children. Using the same marketing strategies they had used to hook younger audiences on cigarettes, tobacco companies began aggressively marketing sugary drinks to children in the 1960s and 1970s. Brands like Kool-Aid, Capri Sun, Hawaiian Punch, and Tang were owned and developed by tobacco companies to target children. Kid-focused marketing. Cartoon characters like Kool-Aid's smiling pitcher and Hawaiian Punch's Punchy were central to advertising campaigns aimed at children. Tobacco companies also introduced child-sized packaging, such as 8-ounce cans of Hawaiian Punch, to appeal to kids. They tested various flavors and colors to create products that were fun, sweet, and irresistible to young consumers. Promotions and loyalty programs. Philip Morris even repurposed its famous Marlboro Country Store loyalty program for Kool-Aid, creating the Wacky Warehouse, where children could redeem purchases for toys and enter sweepstakes. This integration of marketing across television, toys, and even school supplies ensured that kids were surrounded by these sugary drinks in every aspect of their lives. Here is a real-life example. Many adults today remember growing up with Kool-Aid or Capri Sun as staple drinks in their childhood homes. These sugary beverages were not only affordable but heavily marketed as fun, colorful, and easy to drink. Behind the scenes, however, these products were developed with the same psychological tactics used to market cigarettes to young audiences. Big Tobacco's dark legacy in the processed food industry. Even though tobacco companies eventually sold off their food divisions, the strategies they pioneered continue to shape the processed food industry today. The emphasis on hyper-palatable flavors, aggressive marketing, and brand loyalty has been adopted by other food companies seeking to replicate the success of tobacco-owned brands. The lasting influence on grocery store shelves. The addiction study found that, as of 2018, over 75% of branded food products in the U.S. could be classified as hyper-palatable. Even though these foods are no longer directly tied to tobacco companies, the legacy of Big Tobacco's involvement continues to influence how foods are formulated and marketed. Low-fat, high-sodium foods. In an ironic twist, tobacco-owned food companies also contributed to the development of low-fat, low-sugar products in response to the growing obesity crisis they had helped create. By focusing on increasing sodium content, these companies were able to create healthier options that still encouraged overconsumption, keeping consumers hooked without drawing too much attention from health advocates. The lack of regulation and public health implications. Despite overwhelming evidence of the harmful effects of hyper-palatable processed foods, the U.S. has no federal regulations to limit their production or accessibility. Ingredients that have been banned in other countries, such as certain color dyes, brominated vegetable oil, and potassium bromate, they are still allowed in the US. Many popular products, like Mountain Dew, Little Debbie Swiss Rolls, Frosted Flakes, and Skittles, contain these harmful additives. The current state of the U.S. food environment is alarmingly similar to the tobacco industry in the 1950s, before the government stepped in to regulate cigarettes. Just as the public was slow to realize the dangers of smoking, many consumers today are unaware of the addictive nature of processed foods and the long-term health risks they pose. It's time for a wake-up call for consumers. Big Tobacco's foray into the processed food industry had profound and lasting consequences on public health in the U.S. By applying their expertise in creating addictive products and marketing them to vulnerable populations, tobacco companies helped create an American food environment that prioritizes profit over well-being. The chemically engineered, fatty, salty, and sugary foods that now make up 68% of the U.S. food supply were pushed onto consumers by the same companies responsible for the smoking epidemic. As a result, the American public has faced rising rates of obesity, diabetes, and other chronic health issues. Understanding this history can help you make more informed choices about what you bring into your home. Additionally, it highlights the need for stronger regulation of the food industry, similar to the regulations that were eventually imposed on tobacco companies. So, as you navigate the modern food environment, be aware of these historical connections. This will help you make better food decisions and advocate for a healthier food system and a healthier you. Thanks for watching. Please subscribe and visit us often. Remember, our goal is to help you create and maintain health as naturally as possible. Until next time, be safe, be well, and be prosperous.